Perek Chavav. Perek Chavav. A short introduction. A short but very, very important introduction. You have to, when you learn the Tanya, it helps to visualize it as Yechidus. Because that's what it was. Chassidim came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe talked to them. And you didn't tell everybody the same thing. Everyone got a piece of advice that reflected them. Not a piece of advice that reflected the Rebbe, but it reflected them. By the Alter Rebbe, there was a unique Seder. The Seder was as follows. The first Yechidus, on principle, was always Nigla. When you would walk into the Alter Rebbe, the first time the Alter Rebbe would say to you, "Was is this Shvat? What's bothering you?" And many Chassidim used to say to the Alter Rebbe, "We didn't come here for Lamdus. We came here for Avodah," and the Alter Rebbe would insist, this is the Seder. The first Yechidus is Nigla. The famous exception was of Hillel Parachir, that he prepared his Nigla, and the Rebbe told him he should be Meidach himself, and he fainted, and then he ended up going to the middle of Rebbe. And that forget, it reveals that the Alter Rebbe had gesagt, "You're not mine, because if you would be mine, I would first answer you're Nigla. You belong to my son, to Mittel and Rebbe," so he went straight to the Pnimius. But in any case, the second Yechidus, which the Chassidim prepared for many, many years, in some cases, was really a mandate for a person's whole life. The Rebbe, Achos went into the Rebbe. It's to the Avustazach, the first words you hear from a Rebbe. The first word you hear from a Rebbe in your initial Yechidus is Eirah for your whole life. Reuven Dunen always tells the story of Shalom that his Mashpia, Rebbe Shlem Chaim, told him he was a Baal Tshuva, who in the beginning, early state of Israel, he drove a tractor and he helped build made the desert bloom and so forth and so on. And he became a Baal Tshuva. And he hated the tractor. The tractor symbolized to him everything that was not good. He finally comes to New York. He finally goes to the Rebbe. The first words the Rebbe asks him is, "Do you know how to drive a tractor?" So he was so freaked out. He started to sob. The Rebbe tells him, "What are you doing here? What did you come here for?" So how But then there is, he drove a tractor for 35 or 40 years in Haifa, which is one of the most secular cities of Jews in the world. And he was makar of thousands of Yidden, Dafka, with his tractor. But this is the Rebbe tells him, "Do you know how to drive a tractor?" Reuven Dunen was a big chassid, a very unique personality, Reuven Dunen. But every chassid knew that the first Yechidus was the whole person's whole life. And by the Alter Rebbe was really the second Yechidus. So he went to the Alter Rebbe, he gave you instructions. One got instructions from Perek Yud Beis, another one got instructions from Perek Yud Dalet, another one got instructions from Perek Zayin, another one got instructions from Perek Yud Ches, and so forth. Now, a chassid goes out of Yechidus, and there's one thing he knows as a matter of fact. Laziness is not part of the program. In Chabad, the Alter Rebbe's dictionary is missing one word. It's a very sophisticated dictionary. Has almost as many words as the Oxford 27th edition, which is going to be published in 2052 edition. But one word is notoriously absent, is conspicuously missing. Atzlus, lazy, not willing to work, doesn't exist. So if a chassid works and tries his best to do what the Rebbe tells him in Yechidus, and he fails, it's credible. If we are given instructions by the Rebbe and we fail, it's not credible, it's incredible, because we didn't work hard enough. But the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim got a mandate from the Rebbe, this became a Siddur Nefesh. The Chassid coming back to the Alter Rebbe, I failed. You gave me instructions, I prepared 2 years for the Yechidus, I've been working to translate the Yechidus into my life since then for 2 or 3 years, it's not happening. Yeah, and I spoke to this Mashpia and spoke to the other Mashpia, so I'm here. So Perek Chavav begins what would be called in computerese troubleshooting. The Alter Rebbe is addressing technical questions, but they're not technical at all, about the eitzes written in the first 25 parakim of Tanya. From Perek Chavav till Perek Lamed chapter 34, the Alter Rebbe is answering detailed protestations, details what some would call various forms of kvetchai. The Chassidim are communicating and telling the Alter Rebbe, "Rebbe, I can't do it." The Alter Rebbe is giving eitzes, practical eitzes, how a chassid should deal with his failure to achieve his Avodas Hashem potential. And of course, the biggest one of all is the first one the Alter Rebbe mentions, is you have to do it b'simcha b'zirizus. Joy and alacrity, joy and upness, joy and expeditiousness, quickly and efficiently. If you're down in the dumps, you're admitting defeat before you even started to fight. So Perek Chavav begins with the first piece of advice and troubleshoot. The Alter Rebbe says, however, to get at this point, now that we went through 25 prakim of a whole variety of different pathways of serving the Eibishter, so tzarach l'dir klal gadol. It's time to announce the klal gadol. And this klal gadol is really, though it's written in Perek Chavav, it's really the akdama to the Tanya. In other words, a person cannot do anything written in the first 25 prakim of Tanya without knowing this. Just like a physical victory. To win any material, physical struggle. Again, for example, two individuals were wrestling with one another. They wish to throw each other down. He says, Alter Rebbe, the following. If one is lazy and heavy, in other words, he's unmotivated, he can be strong as an ox, he will be quickly defeated. And he'll fall. Even if he's stronger than his fellow. Winning and losing is not only about strength, it's about determination. It's mamish the same way in our war with the Yetzer Hara. It cannot be conquered and defeated by atzlus ukvedus, with laziness and heaviness, lethargy. Because the root of laziness and lethargy is me'atzvus, depression, v'timtum alev, and the heart being stuffed as stone. Close the door, yeah? In other words, being just unporous, right? The person just hard. It's like, I had a fellow that I was very close to years ago he had an issue with depression. And his expression was always a chair episode. I told this to you a few times. He said to me, Rabbi, I had a chair episode yesterday. Do you know what a chair episode did? I said, no. A chair episode means I'm sitting in a chair and I couldn't get up. It's profound depression. It's profound depression. If we don't understand it, we can't imagine that it's real, but it's mamish real. A person just, it's like almost like you're sitting on the couch looking at yourself and you're telling yourself, get up, and you can't. Of course, there are lesser degrees of depression. It doesn't have to be that severe. But the nekuda of atzvus means a chomish kechayes, have no will, I'm not pushed. Atzvus is not angry. Angry is good in a way. Atzvus is not bitter. Atzvus is flat. Atzvus is not an emotion, it's a lack of emotion, it's a lack of dynamism, it's a lack of life. Says the Alter Rebbe, you cannot defeat Yetzer Hara ba'atzvus ukvedus, with laziness and heaviness. Hanamshachas, which are drawn me'atzvus v'timtum alei, from depression and the stuffedness of the heart. Ke'evim, which is like stone. Kiyim, but rather bezrizus. You have to be alive, you have to have dynamism, will. Hanamshachas, which is drawn misimcha, from joy, upsichas halev, and an openness of the heart. V'taharase, and it's being transparent, it's being pure. Mikol nidnu daiga v'atzav, many tiny flutter and drop of worry and depression be'elam in this world. A yid cannot succeed. No person can succeed if they're down. Successful people are motivated. Successful people have hopes and dreams and wishes. They have joy. So the Alter Rebbe proposes what the Heilige Baal Shem Tov made into a lifestyle. Judaism requires simcha. You have to understand. Many Jewish people felt that simcha is tantamount to holiness. A person is too happy, a person is too joyous, they're too free. You want to be from, you have to be fakvetch. Baal Shem Tov says no. You want to be a El Chayid, you have to have life, you have to have optimism, joy and upness, because it gives you power. And you need power to live this life. Not you're so depressed that your heart is also sleeping, so you don't do an Aveda, but you're half dead. You have to have lebedik. Yes, it's true. Simcha does. Not only you become stronger, the Yetzer Hara becomes stronger also, but you're stronger than it. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. Ad kan, a Yid must have simcha. This is the first piece of advice that Alter Rebbe provides to a chassid who says, Rebbe, I'm not succeeding in what you told me to do. No! Lebedike. You have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you're a lost cause. Now the Alter Rebbe raises another issue. And I'm going to present it to you as follows. The following discussion is called Simcha Achar Ha'otzev, joy that follows depression. There is conventional joy, Simcha Freilichkeit Lebedikkeit, which he talked about until now. And then there's joy which comes after depression. There's different types of depression. The most ideal depression is called Otzev Ha'amiti, true depression. What is Otzev Ha'amiti? Depression from Avodas Hashem, tshuva. When a Yid does tshuva, he has to know that the justification, the heter, quote, for being sad and bitter about Avedis is only because there's going to be Simcha Achar Ha'otzev, joy that follows Otzev Ha'amiti, depression. And the Alter Rebbe is going to say two things. Number one, there's an advantage of Simcha over Achar Ha'otzev, over ordinary Simcha. And at the end of the page, the Alter Rebbe is going to argue that if you cannot end the depression and go on to Simcha, it's not worth doing tshuva, because you're going to remain in hell. And you do million Avedis. It's a hard and knows that the quickest way to a person's sin is bad moods. When you do an Aveda, it's a hard, it comes to you as a big chassid and says, I grab you and wants to make you to feel bad, because then you do 10 more Avedas. Doesn't it say every depression has an advantage? Which the Alter Rebbe is reading simplistically as meaning there is an advantage in depression. Look, the name. Pirush, this means. I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong. Pirush, which could perhaps mean that there is a yisen, there's an advantage and a maila in depression itself. Says that from this, but the exact opposite. The words that every otzev yihye will bring an advantage implies sha'otzev mitzad atzmei, the depression by itself ein be'imayla, has nothing good about it. Rak, it is only she'agir, that the person will reach and touch v'yavi and come imenu through it, eze yisin, an advantage which is going to come after the depression, v'hainu, which is hasimcha amitas by the Shem Elokov, the true joy in God, haba, which follows achar, after ha'atzev ha'amiti, true depression. What is true depression? True depression is tshuva. So when a person has avedis, and le'itim uzumanim at fixed times, he does tshuva, al avenesa for his avedis, b'ma nafshe, with the bitterness of his soul, v'leiv nishbar, and the brokenness of his heart. And the way it's explained in Chassidus is you break your heart, and when you break your heart, your soul gets broken. It was already mentioned earlier in Saf Perek Yud Zayin. Shayidei zeh, that when a person breaks his heart and his soul, nishbar ruach hatumah v'sitra achara, it breaks the hold of the spirit and uncleanness and klipa. Umachitza shabaz, on the iron curtain, hamafsekes beinei, which separates between a person, la'avav b'shamayim, and his Father in heaven, mashikosto b'zeh, the zeh writes. Al pasuk on the pasuk ruach nishbar. If you want to break the spirit of klipa, it's through leiv nishbar, by breaking your heart, v'geimen, and so forth. So there is an Indian called otzev ha'amiti, not depression about pizza or about cake or about nonsense. Otzev amiti means tshuva, tzabrochankait from avedis, and tshuva. Says the Alter Rebbe, even that's called otzev amiti, is only a means to an end. Even the sadness of tshuva is not good, it brings an advantage. And what is that? That eventually a person gets to the beginning of the pasuk, that the Eibishter will let him hear it, gladness and joy and so forth. Hashiva li, return to me, Sesein Yeshecha, the gladness of your salvation, Veruach Nadiva, and the spirit of generosity, and so forth. These are psukim for Perek Nun Aleph and Tilim, which is David HaMelch's capital of tshuva, which is why we say it every night in Kishma Shalom Mitlam Seich Meiz David Beveil Nasnav. It's a tshuva capital, and there's a huge dichotomy of tremendous bitterness and simcha. It goes back and forth as Alter Rebbe, because this is the idea. The sadness, even for Yiddishkeit, as Chassidus sees it, is only acceptable, only justified if afterwards there's simcha. Otherwise, it's not worth it. And I just want to tell you that in 1952, Tafshin Yud Beis, the Rebbe had his 50th birthday. And the Rebbe was not comfortable then making a Fabrengen. The first Fabrengen was Tafshin Chof Beis, the Rebbe turned 60. The third Fabrengen was Tafshin Lamed Beis, and he turned 70. But in Tafshin Yud Beis, the Rebbe turned 50, he called in several minyanim of Chassidim to his room, and a handful of Bachrim that he named, and he said a Maimon in his room, Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, which is published. And when the Rebbe said the Maimon, he cried bitter to Tren. It was a very emotional event. The Rebbe was saying Chassidus on his own birthday. Und gewähnt sehr stark. So Reb Shmuel Levitten, who was a smart chassid, said to the Rebbe, after the Maimah, he saw how emotional the Rebbe was. So he said to the Rebbe, Tashmiyeni Sosin V'Simcha. The same word you have here. Tashmiyeni Sosin V'Simcha. The Rebbe should let me hear joy. And the Rebbe answered him, Talgel not some is the kisa. The Rebbe answered him right back. He told the Rebbe, Nu Biba Simcha. So the Talgel to bring joy to Atzomis, to the bones, the kisa that you've crushed and pulverized. In other words, thank you for the advice, but it's not so easy from my point of view, from the way I see it. He told the Rebbe, Tashmiyeni Sosin V'Simcha is the kisa. In other words, it's painful, it hurts. Says the Rebbe, this is the simple reason. Why? The Tikkun Larizal added. Leimer Mizmir Zeh, to say, Kapitel Nun Aleph, not just in Kishim Shalom Midim before you go to bed, but Achat Tikkun Chatzos, Kedem Alim. There are people who say Tikkun Chatzos, they get up at midnight, and lament the Beis HaMikdash, and you cry, and you're bitter, and you're sad, and when the end of it, you say Kapitel Nun Aleph. So the Rebbe says, you know why that Arizal added Kapitel Nun Aleph? Not for the reasons you think, so you should cry some more. But rather, to then learn after Chatzos, the Seder is you learn Nigla till the morning. For those who are Isaac in Chatzos, like Rabbi Yankiv, you cry for the Beis HaMikdash and you learn Nigla. And then you start learning Seid as Achana L'Tfilah. So to learn with true joy by Hashem and the Eibishter Haba, which follows Achar Otzev after the depression. In other words, the Arizal doesn't put in this capital to teach you how to be more sad. The Arizal puts in this capital to teach you that after the sadness has to be joy. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Sheyesh l'simcha zu, says the Rebbe, this joy has yisan an advantage over ordinary joy. The advantage of joy, which is after depression, compared to joy which was not preceded by depression, is like the advantage of light over darkness. But you also the Zayah says al pasuk on the pasuk, for the Isi I have seen. Yisan, there's an advantage la chachma to wisdom min asichas over foolishness. Ki yisan ha'er v'geim, like the advantage of light over darkness, ayin sham v'dal. And the explanation is, of course, joy in serving Hashem is wonderful. But joy after tshuva is so much more wonderful. It's a higher joy, and it's a more meaningful joy, and it's a truer joy. That it's so much greater that the ordinary joy is almost like not joy in comparison. It's an explicit pasuk in the Torah. If a yid fails to serve Hashem with joy, even if he's serving Hashem but he doesn't have joy, so the pasuk finishes off. But everybody knows Peter that Arizal's interpretation of this passage, that it's not enough to serve God. There must be chayas and simcha. The Arizal was very into simcha. The Baal Shem Tov was very into mikveh. The Arizal was very into simcha. And Chabad kochs more in the simcha of the Arizal than the mikveh of the Baal Shem Tov, which is very interesting. In Chabad, the Rebbe Rashab told the Friedrich about Alti Tzadik Harbe. We don't tevel 50,000 times. 310 tefillas, tayag tefillas, and so on and so forth. We tevel once or 3 times, whatever the case may be. We took from the Arizal this thing, simcha shel mitzvah. So if a person is not besimcha, even if he serves the Eibishter, it's a sin. The wonder is that this tachat Hashem, this Arizal is really a Rambam. The Rambam himself in Chasukah says exactly the same idea, that even if you're serving Hashem and there's no simcha, you can be punished for it. And the Rebbe in his footnotes wonders, why does the Alter Rebbe quote the Arizal? He can better quote the Rambam, and I forgot his answer.